The observation chamber of the Dominion flagship Eternal Verdict was not designed for comfort. It was designed for perspective. The ceiling arched impossibly high, a cathedral of black alloy and embedded starlight, each panel etched with the victories of the Dominion, worlds burned, species catalogued, civilizations reduced to data and dust. Commander Sereth Vorn stood at the center of it all. He did not sit. Dominion commanders did not sit when lesser species were present. It implied equality, and there was no equality here. Across from him, framed deliberately beneath the largest victory panel, the fall of the Heliox cluster, stood the human, Ambassador Elara Vance. She was smaller than expected. That was the first thought recorded in Vorn's mind. Smaller, softer, slower, and smiling. Always smiling. She held a glass of something amber, turning it slightly so the liquid caught the artificial starlight. The gesture was casual, almost distracted, as if she were attending a social gathering, not a surrender. "Are you comfortable, Ambassador?" Vorn asked. His voice carried the layered resonance of his species, two tones, one audible, the other felt in the bones. Most species found it unsettling. Humans, according to the briefings, found it irritating. Elara took a small sip before answering. "Exceptionally." She glanced upward, admiring the etched ceiling. "You've preserved your history beautifully." Vorn allowed a pause. Measured, controlled. "They are reminders," he said, "of what happens to those who misunderstand their place." Her smile didn't change. Of course. Behind her stood a single human officer, unremarkable. That was the second note. Completely unremarkable. Dark uniform, neutral posture, hands clasped behind his back. Designation: Lieutenant Aaron Hale. Escort. Logistics. Irrelevant. Vorn dismissed him instantly. His attention returned to Elara. "You arrived, Ambassador," Vorn said, "in a civilian vessel." He gestured toward the viewport. Outside, docked against the massive structure of the flagship, floated the human ship, sleek, silver, elegant. It looked like art. Curved lines, polished hull, no visible weapons. A pleasure craft, a statement, or perhaps a misunderstanding. "It's called the Luminous Veil," Elara said lightly. "We find negotiations go better when everyone feels relaxed." Vorn's inner register shifted. Amusement. "You came to a war summit in a pleasure ship." She tilted her head. "We came to talk." Vorn stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "And if talking fails?" Her eyes met his, unflinching. "Then it fails." There was something in the way she said it. Not defiance, not fear, just acceptance. Vorn decided in that moment that humanity truly did not understand the situation. Good. That made things easier. The proposal. The data projection ignited between them. Star systems, borders, lines shifting, red replacing blue. "The Dominion," Vorn said, "has reviewed your territorial claims." A pause. "They are impressive." Elara set her glass down. Soft click. "Optimism is a very human trait." "You will cede 12 systems," Vorn continued, ignoring the comment. "Effective immediately." Silence. The kind engineered to break lesser minds. Elara studied the projection. "Those systems feed 40 billion people. They will adapt. They will starve. They will learn." She exhaled softly. Not fear, not anger, something closer to mild inconvenience. "I see," she said. Vorn leaned in slightly. "You misunderstand your position." "And you misunderstand ours," she replied. That was unexpected. Vorn's secondary register sharpened. "You have one vessel. We have a fleet positioned within firing range." He gestured toward the viewport, and as if summoned by his words, they appeared. Dozens of Dominion warships, massive, angular, weapons charging, glowing faintly in the void. A show of force, a demonstration, a certainty. 48 ships, Vorn said quietly, each capable of reducing your vessel to plasma in under 3 seconds. Elara turned. She looked. She nodded once. Impressive. That was all. No panic, no shift in posture, no change in breathing. Vorn felt something unfamiliar brush against his awareness. Not fear, not yet, but something adjacent to it. The moment. "Ambassador," Vorn said, softer now, a lie of courtesy. "I wanted you to witness the inevitability." Truth. He gestured once, a command. Outside, weapons ignited, target locks established, 48 firing solutions aligned on the luminous veil. "Last chance," he said. Elara picked up her glass, took a sip, set it down. Soft click. Then she glanced at the man behind her, the unremarkable one, Lieutenant Hale, and she nodded. That was all. A small motion, barely visible, but it changed everything. The shift. Hale moved. Not dramatically, not quickly. He simply raised his hand and touched something at his wrist. A subtle motion, invisible to most, but Vorn noticed. Because suddenly, the room felt different. Hale's posture didn't change, but his presence did. He was no longer background. He was focus. "Authorization confirmed," Hale said. His voice was calm, flat, ordinary. "Executing." The first lie. The Dominion fired. 48 beams of coherent energy tore through space, perfectly synchronized, mathematically flawless. They struck. Nothing. Not because the human ship moved. It hadn't. But because it wasn't there anymore. Or rather, it was. But every Dominion sensor said it wasn't. For 0.2 seconds, reality diverged. And in that gap, humanity rewrote the battlefield. The reveal. The luminous veil changed. Its outer shell, beautiful, polished, decorative, exploded outward in controlled fragmentation, panels drifting away like petals, revealing something else, something darker, heavier, real. Armor beneath elegance, weapons beneath art, rails unfolding, barrels extending, systems awakening. The ship was not a pleasure craft. It had never been. Elara watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. "It's an old concept," she said. Vorn didn't respond. He couldn't, because outside, the war had already begun. The first shot should have ended it. Commander Sereth Vorn knew that with absolute certainty. 48 Dominion warships, 48 perfectly synchronized firing solutions, 48 beams of annihilation crossing the void in flawless geometric precision. It was not a tactic. It was a conclusion. And yet, the human vessel remained, untouched, unmoved, unharmed. The fracture. What? The word died in Vorn's throat because his tactical display disagreed with reality. On screen, the luminous veil was gone. No, not gone. Destroyed. 48 confirmations, 48 kill acknowledgments. Every system agreed.
Every algorithm confirmed, every sensor validated. The human ship was debris. And yet, it floated, whole and intact, outside the viewport. Vorn felt it then, that sharp, cold intrusion into certainty. "Reconcile data," he snapped. His officers moved instantly. "Sensor conflict, telemetry mismatch, target still present visually, rerunning confirmation." The room shifted, not in movement, but in confidence. Dominion crews did not panic. They recalibrated, they adapted, they corrected. That was doctrine, that was identity. But this was not a miscalculation. This was something else. The second shot. Fire again. No hesitation this time, no theatrics, just execution. The fleet adjusted, refined, corrected for error. 48 new targeting solutions, this time perfect. Again. Fire. The void lit up once more. Energy lanced outward. And again, it struck nothing. The lie deepens. "Impossible," one of the officers whispered. Vorn ignored him. "Explain it." Silence. Then a voice, careful, measured, afraid to be correct. "They're not jamming us, Commander." Vorn's eyes narrowed. "Then what are they doing?" A pause. The officer swallowed. "They're convincing us." The realization. On the central display, data began to unravel, layer by layer, signal by signal. The truth emerged. Not interference, not disruption. Deception. Total, complete. Every Dominion sensor, every optical feed, every targeting system was being fed a reality that did not exist. A perfect ghost, placed exactly where Dominion doctrine expected it to be, reacting exactly how Dominion systems predicted it would. A mirror, a lie so precise it became truth, until it wasn't. "They're inside our network," one of the officers said. "No," Hale's voice echoed calmly from behind Elara. "They're not." Vorn turned, slowly. Hale met his gaze. "We're not inside your systems," he said. "We just understand them better than you do." The first kill. The human ship moved, not dramatically, not quickly, just slightly, a fractional shift, barely measurable, but enough. The long black rails along its spine aligned, no glow, no charge up, no warning, just impact. The nearest Dominion cruiser, a vessel that had survived 3 campaigns, simply broke. Its shielding flared, failed, collapsed. A second later, the hull caved inward. A clean hole punched straight through it. Atmosphere vented, structure failed. The ship folded. No explosion, no spectacle, just failure. Silence. For half a second, no one spoke, because Dominion warfare was built on energy, on spectacle, on overwhelming force. This was something else. This was surgical. The collapse begins. Return fire. But return fire required targeting, and targeting required truth, which they no longer had. "Commander, our systems. Multiple conflicting vectors. I have 3 different positions. None of them match visual. They're moving us." "No. They're moving the idea of them." The trap tightens. Outside, the Dominion formation began to shift, ships adjusting, correcting, responding to threats that did not exist.
One vessel veered sharply to port, avoiding a phantom. Another compensated, tracking a ghost. Two ships aligned, both believing the other was the target. "Cease fire," Vorn began. Too late. They fired. At each other. Friendly fire. The first Dominion vessel didn't even raise shields. Why would it? There was no threat. Until there was. The beam struck clean across its midsection. Armor failed instantly. Internal systems detonated. The ship tore itself apart from the inside. The second vessel realized what it had done, 1 second too late. And in that second, the human ship fired again. Another rail strike, another silent impact, another kill. The unraveling. Break formation. But formation was already gone. The fleet, the perfect, unified, coordinated machine, was dissolving. 48 ships becoming 48 individuals, isolated, confused, alone, each receiving different data, different threats, different realities. They fractured the command net. "No," Vorn said slowly. "They've replaced it." The human method. Behind him, calm, still, unmoving, Hale spoke again. "Target Bravo 12 attempting withdrawal." A pause. "Let it go." Vorn's head snapped toward him. "Why?" Hale didn't look at him. "We'll need someone to explain what happened here." Understanding fear. Vorn turned back to the viewport, and for the first time in decades, he did not see a battlefield. He saw loss. Ships dying not because they were weaker, but because they did not understand. Doctrine failing, certainty collapsing, control gone. Elara spoke. "You rely on strength," she said softly. "You rely on scale, on visibility, on being undeniable." She gestured toward the chaos outside. "That works," she said, "until it doesn't." Vorn said nothing, because there was nothing to say. The third phase. The human ship rotated slowly, deliberately, its rail batteries aligning across the remaining formation, each movement precise, measured, unhurried, like a craftsman finishing a task, not a soldier fighting a war. The realization. "This was planned," Vorn said. "Not a question." Elara nodded. "For months. You wanted this." "Yes." "You let us gather your fleet?" she finished gently. "Yes." Vorn felt it fully then. Not confusion, not anger. Fear. Cold, precise, unavoidable. Because this was not a battle. This was a demonstration. Closing line. Outside, another Dominion ship went dark, then another, and as the fleet that never knew defeat began to die in silence, Elara Vance smiled. Not in triumph, not in cruelty, but in quiet, patient certainty. "We've always been very good at letting our enemies make the first move."
The Dominion fleet had faced extinction-level threats before. Ancient swarms, machine uprisings, stars weaponized against them. They had survived all of it, because they understood one thing better than any species in the known galaxy. War was structure, formation, command, control. Remove those, and what remained was not a fleet. The breaking point. "Commander, command relays are collapsing." Signal integrity below 30%. I can't verify friend or foe. Override it, Vorn snapped. But override required authority. Authority required certainty. And certainty was gone. The human tempo. On the human ship, there was no chaos, no shouting, no panic. Only quiet voices. Measured, precise. Bravo 3 attempting regrouping, a calm voice reported. Deny it, Hale replied. How? Feed them a phantom mass spike off their starboard bow. A pause. Done. Outside, the Dominion cruiser reacted instantly. It turned, hard, avoiding something that wasn't there, and in doing so, exposed its flank. Now, Hale said. The railgun fired. Not light, not warning, just impact. The cruiser split open like it had been unzipped by the universe itself. A different kind of war. Commander Vorn watched it happen, and slowly, horribly, he began to understand. They're not fighting us, he said. No one responded, because the answer was already visible. They're directing us. Weapons versus control. Dominion doctrine relied on overwhelming force. You destroyed the enemy faster than they could react. You crushed them beneath certainty. But the humans, they weren't trying to destroy the fleet, not directly. They were rewriting it, turning each ship into a liability, turning coordination into chaos, turning strength into weakness. The isolation effect. Commander, we've lost Bravo Wing entirely. No, correction, they're still active, but they're not responding to command. Because they're not receiving it, another officer said. They're receiving something else. Across the battlefield, Dominion ships began to act independently. Some advanced, some retreated, some held position. Each one convinced they were following correct orders. Each one alone. Each one wrong. The hunter revealed. Hale stepped forward slightly. For the first time, he looked like what he was. Not a pilot, not an escort, something else. Something trained for this exact moment. Target cluster forming. 5 ships attempting to re-establish command hierarchy. Vorn seized on that. Yes, there, focus fire, regroup. No, Hale said calmly. And something in that word silenced the room. Let them connect, Hale continued. Then break them. Precision cruelty. The 5 Dominion ships aligned, linked their systems, shared data. For half a second, they were a fleet again, and in that half second, they became visible. Now, Hale said. The human ship fired. Not once, not twice, but 5 times. 5 perfect shots. 5 perfect kills. Each one timed within milliseconds. Each one striking a critical node. The cluster didn't explode. It collapsed, like a structure whose supports had been removed all at once. Understanding helplessness. Vorn felt something inside him fracture. Not physically, something deeper. Doctrine, belief, identity. This wasn't war. This was control. Total, absolute, unanswered. The numbers fall. Remaining ships, 21, an officer whispered. From 48, in minutes. Not through brute force, but through precision dismantling. The last attempt. Full retreat, Vorn ordered. His voice was steady, but it cost him something to say it. Dominion forces did not retreat, ever. Execute wide dispersal pattern, break all formation, independent escape vectors. If they couldn't fight as one, they would survive as many. It was the only move left. Human response. On the human bridge, there was no urgency, no reaction, just acknowledgement. Fleet dispersing, the tactical officer said. Hale nodded once. Expected. Pursue? A pause. Then, no. That answer echoed. Even Vorn felt it. No? The cruelest mercy. Disable, Hale said, not destroy. The next series of shots changed everything. Railgun fire shifted. Engines, weapons, comms arrays. One by one, Dominion ships went dark. Not exploding, not dying, just ending. Drifting in silence, alive, but helpless. The message. They're sparing us, an officer whispered. Vorn closed his eyes briefly. No, he said quietly. They're leaving witnesses. The last ship. Only a handful remained active now, and at the center of it all, the flagship, Vorn's ship, the eternal verdict. Still intact, still operational, still targeted. The lock. The human vessel rotated, slow, unavoidable, its rail batteries aligned, directly, with the observation deck, with him. Stillness. No one moved, no one spoke, because for the first time, every Dominion officer understood something they had never needed to understand before, what it meant to be completely at someone else's mercy. Elara stepped forward beside him again, calm, composed, unchanged, as if none of this required effort, as if this outcome had always been inevitable. She looked at the broken fleet, at the drifting ships, at the silent battlefield, then back at him. You still have options, she said softly. The truth settles. Vorn stared at the human ship, at the weapons aimed at his existence, at the wreckage of his certainty. And he understood. This had never been about winning. It had been about teaching. Final line. Behind him, Hale spoke one final time. Quiet, measured, absolute. Target locked. A pause. Then, awaiting instruction. And for the first time in his long, undefeated life, Commander Sereth Vorn did not know what came next.
The silence was heavier than the battle. It pressed against the observation chamber like gravity. Outside, the battlefield drifted in slow motion. Dominion warships, once symbols of absolute authority, now hung broken and powerless in the void. Some vented atmosphere in thin, fading streams. Others rotated slowly, systems dead, weapons silent. A fleet that had never known defeat, now reduced to wreckage and witnesses. The stillness after war. Commander Sereth Vorn did not move. He stood exactly where he had stood when the battle began. But everything about him had changed. His posture, his breath, the subtle tension in the plating along his shoulders. For the first time in his career, he looked like a man who understood loss. Behind him, his officers were quiet, not awaiting orders, not preparing countermeasures, just existing, because there was nothing left to do. The target remains. Across the void, the human ship held position, dark, unadorned now, no longer pretending to be beautiful. Its railgun batteries remained fixed, locked, unwavering, on the eternal verdict, on him. The silence was heavier than the battle. It pressed against the observation chamber like gravity. Outside, the battlefield drifted in slow motion. Dominion warships, once symbols of absolute authority, now hung broken and powerless in the void. Some vented atmosphere in thin, fading streams. Others rotated slowly, systems dead, weapons silent. A fleet that had never known defeat, now reduced to wreckage and witnesses. The stillness after war. Commander Sereth Vorn did not move. He stood exactly where he had stood when the battle began. but everything about him had changed. His posture, his breath, the subtle tension in the plating along his shoulders. For the first time in his career, he looked like a man who understood loss. Behind him, his officers were quiet, not awaiting orders, not preparing countermeasures, just existing, because there was nothing left to do. The target remains. Across the void, the human ship held position, dark, unadorned now, no longer pretending to be beautiful. Its railgun batteries remained fixed, locked, unwavering on the eternal verdict, on him. "Target lock confirmed," Hale said quietly. He hadn't raised his voice once, not during the battle, not now. Awaiting instruction. Power without urgency. That was the detail Vorn could not escape. Not the destruction, not the precision, not even the deception. It was the calm, the complete absence of urgency, as if the outcome had never been in doubt, as if this moment had already happened and they were simply walking through it. Elara moves. Elara Vance stepped forward. Her heels clicked softly against the dark floor, measured, unhurried. She stopped beside Vorn, close enough that he could hear her breathing, steady, controlled, human. "You still have 14 ships with partial functionality," she said. Her voice was the same as before, polite, professional, almost gentle. "I would recommend recalling them." A pause. "Before my associate decides they're inefficient." Vorn swallowed. The motion was small, but it cost him. The question. "How?" he asked. The word came out stripped of everything, no authority, no command, just truth. "How did you do this?" Elara considered the question, not dismissively, not mockingly, as if deciding how much truth he deserved. The answer. "We knew," she said simply, "about your plan." Vorn's eyes narrowed slightly. "How long?" 8 months. The words landed softly, but they hit harder than any weapon. "The real war. We intercepted your communications," she continued. "We studied your doctrine. We mapped your response patterns." She glanced briefly toward the viewport. "We built this entire scenario for you." Vorn felt something inside him collapse completely. Not strategy, not power, something deeper. The belief that he had been in control. "You let us gather the fleet," she said. "Yes. You let us think that you were hunting us," she finished, a faint smile. "We needed you all in one place." The final blow. She reached into her jacket, removed a small data chip, plain, unremarkable. She stepped forward and placed it into his hand. Soft click, the same sound as her glass, the same sound of every ending she created. The terms. "The terms of disengagement," she said. Vorn stared at the chip, did not move, did not speak. "You will withdraw all Dominion forces from contested systems within 90 days, she continued. "Your fleet will be reduced to defensive capacity. Independent verification will ensure compliance." A pause. "Further expansion toward human territory will not occur again." "And if we refuse?" Vorn asked. The answer without words. Elara turned her head slightly, toward the viewport, toward the railguns, toward the silent proof of what refusal looked like. Then she looked back at him and said nothing. It was enough. Understanding. Vorn looked at the battlefield, at the remains of his fleet, at the handful of drifting survivors, at the ship that had dismantled everything he believed in without ever raising its voice. "You could have destroyed us," he said. "Yes. Why didn't you?" Elara's expression shifted, not into warmth, not into kindness, but into something more fundamental, something older, the truth of humanity. "Because destruction is easy," she said. "Anyone can burn a fleet." She stepped closer, her voice quiet, certain. "We prefer outcomes that last." Vorn said nothing because for the first time he understood exactly what that meant. The final question. "What are you?" he asked, not as an insult, not as a challenge, but as a genuine need to understand. The final answer. Elara was quiet for a moment. Then, "We are a species that learned early that being underestimated is an advantage," she said. She glanced briefly toward Hale. Something unspoken passed between them. "We don't need to be the strongest or the loudest." Her eyes returned to Vorn, steady, unavoidable. "We just need to be the ones still standing when everyone else realizes they've already lost." The lesson. She straightened slightly, that small gesture again, not nerves, not tension, punctuation. "You assumed," she said, "that because we value beauty, we must be weak, that because we arrived in something elegant, we must be unarmed, that because I smiled, a pause, just long enough to land, I didn't notice the insult." Vorn lowered his gaze, for the first time, not in calculation, not in strategy, but in recognition. The exit. Hale moved to the door, opened it, held it there, silent, final. Elara turned to leave, then paused at the threshold, just for a moment. "It really was excellent wine," she said lightly. "Please pass along my compliments." And then she walked out. Hale followed. The door closed behind them. Soft click. Aftermath. The observation chamber felt more smaller. The vast ceiling, the etched victories, the symbols of dominance, all of it diminished. Seret Vorn stood alone, a data chip in his hand, a fleet in ruins, a future rewritten. Outside, the human ship was already turning away, its weapons lowering, its presence fading back into silence. It did not celebrate, it did not linger, it simply left. Final line. And as the Dominion flagship drifted powerless among the wreckage of its own certainty, Seret Vorn understood with absolute clarity humanity's greatest weapon had never been their ships, or their weapons, or even their strategy. It had always been the patience to smile until the moment they didn't have to anymore.